The Highway, a Radio Whitehorse production. This is the story of a highway, the story of vision, courage, skill, and the fulfillment of a dream. A story that starts before the turn of the century and still lives on. This is the Alaska Highway story, a never-ending tale of human effort, a monument to the ingenuity of man. There have been many famous highways in history. The Roman Appian Way, born of conquest and trade, built before the birth of Christ and still in use today. The Roman roads of England, the Autobahns, the Burma Road, all great roads. But the Alaska Highway will take an honorable place amongst these in the history books of tomorrow. The year is 1896. Major Moody of the Northwest Mounted Police paces briskly along Edmonton Street.
Come in. Oh, come in, Major Moody. Sit down, please.
Thank you, sir.
Major, you have had considerable experience in the North. You know the land, the Indians, and their ways.
Yes, sir.
I shall be brief and to the point. You are to command an expedition to blaze a trail from Fort St. John north, as far as practical.
Well, how far is practical, sir?
As far north as you can drive yourself and your men.
May I ask, sir, the purpose of this venture?
This is the preliminary work to build an all-Canadian route through the northern jungles to the Yukon. A road is required to enable the prospectors and gold seekers to reach the Northlands without leaving their frozen corpses along the way.
A road? A proper road through to that country, sir?
Yes, Major. A road that will open up the north. Now, you have much to do. See my adjutant about men and material required.
On September the 4th, 1897, Major Moody with 3 constables, a cook, and an Indian guide set out to the unknown to blaze a trail north from Fort St. John to the Yukon Valley. The vastness of the north swallowed them up, and 13 months later, scourged by deep snow, forest fires, starvation, and a doubtful diet of butchered pack horse, they emerged at Fort Selkirk, 1,600 miles north of Edmonton. The weary men rested and regained their strength. Then Major Moody returned to Edmonton to report.
Major Moody, I have read your report. Your trials were heavy and your way was hard. I congratulate you on your magnificent effort. Have you anything to add to what you've said here?
Only to reiterate the conclusion of my report, sir, that a road to the north is completely unfeasible.
Just 1 year later, in 1898, the world looked north. Gold was for the taking. Men poured into the Yukon to dip their fingers into the gleaming Klondike creeks.
Superintendent Constantine, Commissioner Bowen Perry will see you now.
Good day, Superintendent. Come in. Come over here and look at this map. Now, here's Fort St. John, and here is Dawson City. I have received instructions from Ottawa to start constructing a wagon road from Fort St. John to the Klondike in the Yukon.
Have you read Moody's report, sir? It is going to take some doing.
Yes, I've studied it. Seems to me he had insufficient power. He had only himself, 5 men and a few mules. I've arranged for you to have over 30 men and 60 horses.
My horses, sir? I don't understand. You mean that I...
You will command this second attempt, Superintendent. Frankly, I don't know a man better qualified for the job.
Thank you, sir. I shall need some time. I will have to give all of this very careful consideration. I hardly know what to say at the moment.
Take your time, but plan well. Let me know your needs. Here are the specifications. The road is to be 8 feet wide, with rest houses built every 30 miles.
And so, in 1905, Superintendent Constantine, assisted by Inspector Richards, laid plans for this new adventure in roads. A headquarters was built in Fort St. John, and work commenced. These hardy few, attempted with nothing but axes, courage, and brawn to build a road from Fort St. John to the Yukon. Day and night the work went on as the builders came to grips with nature, and when Commissioner Bowen Perry arrived in 1906 to inspect progress, he was able to traverse 375 miles of completed road, graded hills, bridge streams, and corduroyed muskeg. But the project was discarded, and the trail-worn Mounties left, a monument to courage, later to be called the Road to Nowhere.
The delegate from Alaska is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, my predecessors and I, ever since the turn of the century, have brought before this Congress of the United States of America the matter of an overland route from Seattle to Fairbanks. I don't have to remind you, sir, that Alaska is a storehouse of treasures. The value of this northern domain has been stated by men of public prominence with a fervor and conviction that can only come from men who have seen the riches in this land. For 20 years this story, nay, this plea, has been made for a road that will carry the raw riches of Alaska in the north to the factories of the United States in the south. But still now, in 1928, we find the road for which we are fighting still subject to doubting questions and a colossal disinterest.
The fight went on. Donald MacDonald of the Alaska Road Commission started a one-man campaign for a highway that would eventually reach from the Panama to the Polar Sea. For 26 years, he would not be silenced. With prophetic vision, he foresaw the possible military advantage of such a road, and finally, in 1939, just 18 months before Pearl Harbor, he said,
I don't know who taught people to place all their reliance in Pearl Harbor, but I do know that this blind faith is not shared in Alaska. We can't afford to let Alaska remain a naval liability, which is exactly what she will be, as long as she has no overland connection with the states.
A world waits silently. (1939) War. Europe is aflame, the long armistice is over, and mankind is once again locked in mortal combat. France falls and the world mourns. And then, a few months later,
The Lone Ranger. Hail Silver! A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty Hi-Yo Silver.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air. President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack...
a world became silent, waiting for the giants to speak.
President Roosevelt wrote out a verse to me in his own handwriting from Longfellow. Sail on, O ship of state. Sail on, O Union strong and great.
And on the other side of the Atlantic, addressing a joint session of Congress, President Roosevelt speaks to a shocked nation.
With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
MacDonald's warning, voiced over 26 years and ignored, was now transformed into hurried action to make up for lost time in 50 years of discussion. The enemy had landed on the Aleutians. Dutch harbor attacked. A highway to Alaska must be built. In hours, a decision was reached, and on the 14th of February, 1942, a directive was issued by President Roosevelt to commence construction of a highway to Alaska.
A pioneer road to Alaska will be pushed to completion with all speed within the physical capacity of the troops. The objective is to complete the entire route at the earliest practical date, to a standard sufficient only for the supply of the troops.
With these orders, the U.S. Army engineers started the work in early March 1942, just a few months after Pearl Harbor. By land, sea, and air, men and materials flowed north to the Yukon. The dreams of Canadians Moody and Constantine, of Americans MacDonald and MacDonnell, were dreams no more. The highway was being built, but not with a handful of men and a few mules, but with thousands of men and machines and the might of two nations.
Hello, honey. Busy today?
Oh, so-so. The usual.
Get washed up and then read a while. Supper will be ready in a minute. The Whitehorse star's on the stool. Did you see Billy? He's always late.
He was playing up the street. Friday, 13th of March. What good news could happen on Friday the 13th of anything? Say, have you read this, Lil? The highway to Fairbanks is going to be built. I wonder if it'll come by here. Listen to this. Last Thursday, it was officially announced in Washington that the construction of a highway from Dawson Creek to Fairbanks, Alaska, is to be undertaken by the American Army.
A flood of excitement was apparent throughout northern BC, the Yukon, and Alaska when this announcement was made. And just 3 weeks later, on the 4th of April, 1942, Whitehorse, Yukon was stunned when...
So there was nothing I could do but spend $100 on the claim, or I would have lost it.
I think the idea of having to spend $100 on a claim each year is way too much, especially during a war.
What's that? Hey, what the heck?
There's a band down by the station. It's coming this way. For gosh sakes, Bill, there's a bunch of soldiers marching up the street. They must be Americans.
Can't be. They would only come here to build the highway, but it was only announced they were going to build it 3 weeks ago.
Bill, you're nuts. Those are Yanks. There must be over 100 of them. They'll need more than that to do this job.
Not if they're Texans.
Brother, this ain't Texas.
Yes, they had arrived, unannounced, at Whitehorse, 4th of April, 1942. Every day saw materials, supplies, and equipment arriving. 6 trains a day, men, and more men poured over the White Pass and transformed the quiet community of Whitehorse, with a population of 350, into an army camp of thousands.
You Americans sure get action. What are you going to do with this mountain of stuff, Sergeant?
Why, this is nothing, sir. Way down in Texas, we...
Almost within hours, the work started. From a line laid out from aerial photographs, engineers blazed a central line and cleared enough brush to make it passable. Behind came more bulldozers thrusting aside trees, brush, and debris. Strung behind for 30 to 50 miles were soldiers, and Canadian and American contractors made the forest ring as they hewed out a rough trail.
Dear Mom, I hope this letter finds you and Dad in the best of health. How is old Rover? Is he okay? How is Dad?
The captain says that speed and more speed is the watchword on the highway. The mountains shake with the roll of bulldozers and all the mechanical equipment we have up here. I'm on a gang that's flown ahead to build bridges across the streams before the main group comes up. Oh, Dad, I do hope he's all right. He says there's a lot of muskeg and quagmires here south of Whitehorse, and the going is really tough. Our outfit made the best progress.
Meanwhile, the northern section were fighting rivers, muskeg, icings, and slides. And as the summer wore on, that little insect of the north, the no-see-um, was trying to win a battle of its own. An epic of road building was underway. Day after day, men struggled.
Say, Major, if I don't get a load of spare parts for these machines soon, I'll have to stop work.
Keep hairwiring them together. Stuff's been ordered. It's got to arrive soon.
It's about time someone got on to Washington. I ordered 2,500 tires and I got 250. I can't run these bloody trucks without tires.
Look, I'll try and see Colonel Wilson. Maybe he can get some from the Canadians. We helped them out last week. I'm looking at you to keep this stuff rolling. A bunch of spares aren't going to lick the southern section.
I need that scraper for an hour. The generator's got to be...
Every day these men met their problems as they came. Everything from black flies to fan belts, rations to wire rope, supplies, tons of supplies were needed to keep this gigantic land armada rolling.
Sarge, I was talking to a guy from an outfit working south of Muncho Lake. They ain't got half the muskeg we got.
Yeah, well, so what? We got muskeg, no seams, and mosquitoes too, and we're still making better time, Corporal.
No seams. Say, Sarge, what do no seams eat anyway?
Corporals, get going!
Finally, the job was done. The ring of axes ceased, machines stopped, and a relative silence fell over the length of the highway. 100 feet above Kluane Lake, just 100 miles east of the Alaska-Yukon border, stood Alexander Clark Fisher's cabin. This majestic setting symbolized the vastness which the highway penetrated. There, a simple ceremony was held on November the 20th, 1942, commemorating the completion of this great undertaking. The name Soldier Summit was born. At Soldier Summit, American soldiers and Royal Canadian Mounted Police stood side by side as a distinguished group of men spoke of what had been accomplished. Colonel Bush, Chief of Staff, Northwest Service Command, said that day,
"All of us who take part in this brief ceremony are merely representatives of others. Those here in this imposing wilderness are the symbols of countless others who have made this undertaking a reality. We are opening formally the Alcan Highway in a wilderness at Soldier Summit above Kluane Lake in the solitary hinterlands of the Yukon Territory, a few miles south of the Alaska border."
General J.A. O'Connor spoke of the symbolism of the joint Canadian-American effort.
The Alcan Highway, as we call it, is truly a joint effort of our two nations. The name we have given it symbolizes that. Through the courtesy of the Canadian government and...
The Honorable Ian Mackenzie, representing the Canadian government, read a message from Prime Minister Mackenzie King.
The Prime Minister concludes, "The builders of the Canada-Alaska Highway have made an enduring monument to the well-being of both nations. We met all the stern gravity of nature, overcame the difficulties of crags and creeks, of rivers and mountains, of swamps and muskeg. This, indeed, is a gigantic triumph of modern engineering science. It is only one more great link between our two lands."
And then Ian Mackenzie of Canada and Mr. Robert Bartlett of the United States each took one blade of a pair of engraved scissors and snipped a red, white, and blue ribbon, and the highway was opened. And so the struggle was over. McDonald's dream was a reality, and shortly after, the first truck rolled into Fairbanks, Alaska, having completed the 1,600-mile trip from Dawson Creek. The job was done. The Allies gained strength in all theaters of war. North Africa, Italy, the island march in the Pacific, the landings in France, Europe freed, Japan succumbed to the might of the Allied military power, and finally, a tired world enjoyed the restful, relaxing balm of peace. The world rested to catch its breath. Canadians everywhere looked to new horizons. The United States turned over the Alaska Highway to Canada 6 months after the cessation of hostilities. Canada was confronted with the task of maintaining and improving this 1,200 miles of untamed road. And on the 3rd day of April 1946, a simple ceremony took place at milepost 917 on the crest of the 2-mile hill leading out of Whitehorse. There, title to the highway was accepted by Canadian authorities, General McNaughton and Brigadier Walsh. A bulldozer was driven up a ramp by an American who handed over control to a Canadian soldier who drove it away. With this simple act, a highway and all its installations changed hands. General McNaughton, who was the principal speaker, concluded by saying,
"So you can see that Canada has assumed her full share of the financial burden of this great project, and has paid the United States $77 million for everything deemed to be of permanent value. Since then, Canada has spent an additional $30 million.
And the day was almost done. The Padre made the invocation, and a silence fell over the gathering.
Almighty God, in whom alone abides the consummation of unity for all mankind, grant that we, servants of nations called Christian, may break bread together with thy blessing upon this bounty, remembering as we eat.
The ceremony was over. The Canadian Army had accepted a tremendous undertaking.
Sit down, please, gentlemen. Well, it looks like the Canadian Army is in the highway business. Now, to tackle first things first, highway maintenance. On this map, you will see the tentative locations of the maintenance camps. The senior highway engineer has selected these locations with two considerations in mind. One, the area to be maintained, and two, the availability of water. Water, of course, must be given first consideration. This will require a civilian establishment, drivers, an office staff, and a considerable number of senior civilian technical people. So there's a big job to do, and a large civilian staff is essential.
The Army immediately came to grips with the multitudinous problems of staff, pay, equipment, finance, housing, utilities, and soon the major problems were solved, and without missing a beat, the care of the highway went on.
I'll meet you in Fort St. John Tuesday, Major. I'll get Captain Martin to complete those compaction tests at the bridge site, and I'll have them ready for you when you arrive.
A string of air bases form an aerial highway today, as they did during the war. Thousands of planes were delivered to our allies along what is known as Bomber Road. The air bases at Fort Nelson, Fort St. John, and Whitehorse, and many others originally built by the Department of Transport, were accepted by the Air Force. The Army's sister service, the RCAF, was now in business too. Month after month, year after year, the Army's work went on. Emergency airstrips built and maintained. New roads constructed to fan out from the main highway. 24 temporary bridges built, 15 permanent bridges, together totaling nearly 8,000 feet of bridge construction. Duke River, Slims River, Nesutlan Bay, Donjack. All were names remembered by hundreds of Canadian and United States soldiers and civilians of the Yukon. Landslides, washouts occurred without warning and challenged the engineering skill and courage of those sent to combat them and repair the damage. An endless variety of troubles were in this highway's bag of tricks. Icing, dust, glaciers combined to bar men's attempt to tame her, but today...
Bill, I've just received a letter from Alice. You remember Alice, Vinnie? Well, she and her husband drove to Fairbanks, Alaska for their vacation. I can't believe it.
What? From Portland? Listen, that road's tough. What's left of their car?
No, listen to this. Oh, where is that place? I know it was down at the... Oh, yes, here. All in all, it was grand. The road was the most surprising thing about the whole trip. It's really smooth and well maintained by the Army. We found it easy to drive 300 miles per day and could have done more. The exhaust pipe or something went wrong, but Harry had no trouble getting it fixed. You should do it next year. The scenery is spectacular. You'll love it.
Yes, today it's no longer a military road alone. Truckers and tourists travel its length to earn a living or to gaze at the majestic beauty of the Yukon scenery. Hamlets have now grown into large communities. Whitehorse, Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, Watson Lake, Mayo, and many others now place names known to thousands, an honor once reserved for Dawson City alone. Yes, the highway is now a busy thoroughfare.
Another cup of coffee, Johnny?
Thanks, Peg. Give us a donut, too. How you doing here now, Peg?
Fine. All the time you truckers keep rolling up and down this highway, I'll do okay. Truckers are the hungriest bunch. Summer brings a lot of tourists, too.
Yeah, they're always stopping to take pictures. Never look behind. They always take pictures on a hill. Doesn't anyone take pictures on level spots?
Hello, Peggy. Hello, Johnny.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Barron. Haven't seen you for a month or two. Been outside?
Yes, Johnny. Went to Montreal and Vancouver. Been busy financing that development east of Mayo. It's going to be a big thing, Johnny. I need some good men. There's a lot to do.
I hear there's oil by the millions of barrels up that way and on the Peel Plateau. What with oil, gold, asbestos, silver, lead, zinc, this Yukon country's going to bust wide open.
That's true, but it's not easy to develop a country, Johnny. You have to be sort of a sidewinder and enjoy roughing it. But to make the land give up its wealth is an exciting occupation, and it makes money if you can do it.
Say, I'll be in Mayo Friday, Mr. Barron. I'd like to talk to you.
Coffee, Mr. Barron? Are you staying for dinner? We've got some nice...
Yes, the North is busting its britches. There's a new rush to the Yukon, but it's not the helter-skelter, honky-tonk mass movement of '98. The gold rush was colorful and dramatic, but now the hunt for wealth follows a design. Men of science have linked arms with the prospector, without whose energy and determination the Yukon would still be just a sleeping beauty.
They have blasted and hewn a new road by the site of the old trail. They have built their bridges of stone and steel. They have laid their grades for a swifter wheel than the old trail ever knew.
Is this the whole story of the highway? No. The full story will be told in the future, where over its surface will pass the engines of commerce to wrest new wealth and new bonanza from this vibrant land of the North, the Yukon. The highway conceived by men of vision, born in the throes of war, adds new horizons to the realm of Canada. The highway, a triumph of construction, a key to northern progress.
The Highway, written by Roy Minter, was first produced in Whitehorse in 1956. Appearing in the 1982 production were actors Tony Pennicott, Conrad Boyce, Michael Dale, Paul Foster, Laurie Murdoch, and Val Holland. The Highway is a CBC Whitehorse production.